All right. Well, welcome back to the Finding Something Real podcast, friend. This is your host, Janell Wood, and I am so excited that you are listening in for season 7, where we've been having wonderful conversations with different co-hosts that come on the podcast and ask their questions about faith. And this particular season, I've been co-hosting with my friend, Olivea. Olivia's asked some great questions about what it means to follow Jesus and questions that she has, even as a believer, about what that looks like. We've talked about different things related to identity and to trusting God even when life doesn't go the way that you anticipate. We've talked about what if this stuff is just all made up. And we've also talked about past hurt and pain that comes with losing a parent.
When the people around me and other people on social media and stuff are always having boyfriends or in this relationship, or, once they get out of one, they're in another one so fast. And it's like, Jesus, why are you answering them? And why did that come easy to them? But then for me, how come it isn't coming for me? And sometimes it makes me feel like, not like they're more important, but like, how come they're more worthy of getting that when it's something that I really, really, really want to have?
I just am really grateful for Olivea being here and reaching out and saying, yeah, I'll be on the podcast. And she's back today and she's got an update about life. So Olivea, welcome back to the podcast.
Hello.
You've moved since the last time you were on here. I don't remember if you had moved the last time we recorded or not.
Yes, the last time we recorded, I was just in the process of it. So now I'm finally out of the process. Yeah, I just moved to Ellensburg. So it's been definitely quite an adjustment, but also very rewarding at the same time. Everything's gone smoothly. It's just been the jobs. But other than that, everything's working out. I definitely believe it's all the Lord because it's kind of going smoothly. So until another big hump comes, but yeah, it's been pretty good. It's been really nice. My roommate is finally coming on Tuesday. So kind of this whole month I've been kind of living by myself with my dog. So, but he's been coming over on the weekends and stuff. So it's not been the whole weekend, but I'm scared I'm going to get too adjusted to living alone.
It's a real fair fear, right?
Yeah, but I think it'll be good.
Quick question for you. I know over the weekend we got to stop in and say hi, and we also saw some of our friends there, the Baileys. Did you guys end up connecting? Did you get together, or is that in the future?
Yeah, we did. She called me Saturday morning, and I met her and her husband at their house. They made tacos, and then her sister-in-law, I think, came over, and they're such a hoot. They're really funny. And then I met up with them at church yesterday, and I just sat with them, and then that was the last time we talked. But I probably will most likely see them again. So
Olivea, that's like the coolest thing. Okay, so shout out to Barb and Mike. And honestly, it's a great segue to our guest today because Barb and Mike, years ago, when we were in a different season in life, my husband and I, we went to this small group that met at their house, and they're an older couple. Even if she watches this, I'm sure she'll agree. I think they're in their 60s or 70s and maybe even more. But they invited us in. We were young parents. I think even at that time we had 4 kids, but they were all a lot younger. And my husband and I, we just had the most amazing experience in their home group because they were so welcoming. They loved the Lord so much. And we just felt included and welcomed as we were. And I'll never forget some of the wisdom that I gleaned from them. And it's amazing how different people can come into your life at different seasons and bless you and encourage you in your walk, in your journey. And today's guest is associated with a different couple that did the same thing in my life years ago. And honestly, I was just sharing with somebody yesterday. I was sharing with her about my faith in Jesus. She's not a Christian. And I told her my story and I said, I grew up in a Christian home and all these different things, but I struggled with identity. I struggled with rejection, all these different issues that I kind of kept under the surface. And then when I was a teenager, I started going to this youth group and I met this couple named Jonathan and Janice Schmidt. And they changed my life because they welcomed me in, and they welcomed me into something beautiful and lovely. And so their love for Jesus was so real and so compelling. I wanted what they had. You know what I mean? And when you meet somebody like that, so full of joy and so full of an overflow that reaches people, because it's this vertical thing that then just overflows out this way, it changes your life. And for me, that was a long time ago now. I'm in my 40s, but that was, like 25 years ago plus. And I still think of them weekly on a regular basis. There is not a week that goes by where something doesn't trigger a memory of something that Jonathan and Janice sowed into me and to the other kids in that Snohomish Free Methodist youth group. And if any of you are listening here, please comment, because I know Janice will watch this later. And I would love for her to be aware that there's so many of us who experience something similar. But, there's something beautiful about the faithfulness of people. And so I love, Olivea, that you experienced that with Barb and Mike, because that's been our experience with them as well. And today's guest is Jonathan and Janice's son, Jason, their youngest son. He's been on the podcast before. He's in ministry. And I just love talking with him several years ago when he came on. And I can't wait to hear more from him about his own walk with Jesus. And I know he's going to inspire and encourage us. So welcome to the podcast, Jason Schmidt.
Hi, thanks for having me again. It's good to be back.
Hey, I'm excited to chat with you. I felt such a kinship to you because of our mutual love for your parents, but also, it's beautiful. I was showing you a couple pictures before we pressed record, and now I have to show this again. So I have this picture, this scrapbook from when I was 16. This is 1997. Pictures of your dad and your mom. But then I also have these pictures of kids in our youth group holding this baby who I swear is you.
And I believe you 1,000%. I haven't ever seen these, but I believe you
Yeah.
100%. That's me.
Yeah. So
Question though, is that one on the back, the one that says Denver?
Yeah.
Is that when you guys went to the stadium and like the stadium flooded? And we were like,
yes,
I've heard that story. So I think, yes, I was on that trip, and I think I might be getting my story wrong, but I might have been the only kid on that trip, in which case you would be correct.
You were the only baby. And these are clippings from that flood. These are clippings from that flood. This is all sorts of craziness. I don't know. Yeah, there's teenagers here, faded pictures, because that's what happens. The letter that your dad wrote when they left. And after that. But yeah, this was a huge part of my life. And Jason, I want to hear more about you. So you live in New Mexico and you're in ministry. Would you mind sharing about who you are?
Yeah. The last time we spoke, I was also in New Mexico. I moved back to New Mexico it was at the very end of 2019. And then I've been here ever since. I grew up here, moved away up to Washington when I was 15, almost 16. And kind of bounced around in the Pacific Northwest for about 8 or 9 years before I moved back. And then I've been here ever since. I came back for a job as a strength and conditioning coach at like a little privately owned facility. But the last time we spoke, I was kind of at the beginning. I was starting to kind of flesh out what I thought a calling into ministry might be, or what that might look like. And since then, it has developed in a whole lot of different ways. But yeah, I'm now working at a church here in town called Hope Church. And I am the young adult and high school youth director. And so it's wonderful. Right before this, I was teaching PE at a high school, and that was a ton of fun. It was everything that I thought it would have ever been when I was growing up. It was like, I don't know if I will ever find a job that is just as blatantly fun as that every single day. It was fantastic. And it was at a really cool school here in town. It's called Highland High School. And while I was there, I started coaching for the boys soccer team. And so I'm still doing that while I'm working at the church. So I'm working at the church with the youth and the young adults. And then I'm the head boys coach for the soccer team over at Highland.
Did you give up the funnest job ever to go work in ministry? Is that what you're saying? Or
I gave up the funnest job ever to go and work in the most fulfilling job ever.
Okay, so you have to flesh that out a little bit, because I was at I was at a student conference over the weekend, last weekend. It was the reality conference that Stand to Reason does. Um, it's really cool. They do apologetics with teenagers and college students and middle schoolers. It was really amazing. But they had a breakout session for the adults and the leaders. And one of the one of the statistics, it was like mind-boggling. And I'm going to get the statistic wrong, but it said something about most people who work in ministry with youth, 60% would leave the job if they could.
Wow.
And it was really like heartbreaking. And it just made me think it is a really hard job sometimes. So tell me about your fulfilling, maybe not always as fun job in ministry.
Well, and so when I say that, I only say that because when I was at Highland, my average day looked like, 5 class periods, sometimes 6 class periods a day
Mm.
of playing a game,
Yeah.
or leading a bunch of high school students through, health and wellness, which is a massive passion of mine.
Mm.
Um, and so I loved it every single day. But that is not to say that I don't also have a ton of fun doing what I'm doing now. It's just that I will never look you in the face and with any amount of truthfulness tell you that I would be rather sitting at an office sending an email than playing ultimate frisbee with a bunch of 15-year-olds. Like that will never that will never be true of
Yeah.
me ever. And the job at Highland, like it was just like Highland was such a cool place because it's so many kids who have so much need. It's a Title I school. It's in the International
Mm.
District in Albuquerque. And so it was an opportunity to connect with a lot of kids on a broad scale and just get them to enjoy themselves. I saw that as kind of the primary goal of being a PE teacher there. Yes, I wanted to teach them about nutrition. And yes, I wanted to teach them about the long-term effects of cardiovascular fitness and whatnot. But more than anything, I think like my primary goal was to teach kids just to kind of let their guard down and enjoy themselves a little bit. Because
Yeah.
I think especially for a lot of those kids, it was kind of the one and only place where they could do that.
Mm-hmm.
Between complicated home lives or complicated situations with parents or lack thereof or whatever. For a lot of them, it was their place to kind of come down a little bit. And so to kind of see in kids the progression of walls coming down and the different paces that it happens for each, like it was a lovely place. So when I made the decision to go into ministry, I genuinely felt like there was a decision laid before me that it was truly that. It was just a decision. It wasn't necessarily a God told me I had to do this or God told me I had to do this. Because I think the kingdom impact from being at Highland was massive and could have continued to be massive. And it was a hard decision, honestly, to leave. But it wasn't because I was going into, I didn't just see youth ministry as like a stepping stone to what I wanted to do down the line. No, I love what I do now.
Mm-hmm.
And now I get to do what I did at Highland, but just 14 degrees deeper, and
Mm-hmm.
14 levels more intimate in the sense of what you're talking about and what you're allowed to talk about and how long are you allowed to talk about spiritual things before you start getting worried about admin coming in and,
Yeah.
getting mad at you for, but so I love what I do currently working with the youth. I don't
Yeah.
think it is something that I would leave if I could, quote unquote.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, if there's, down the road another decision laid before me, I will approach it the same way as I did this job at Highland and
Yeah.
this youth job. But there's no desire in me to be doing anything else,
Yeah.
honestly.
Did you find that there was any crossover with the kids that you got to work with at Highland with your current position? Did any of them find you in youth ministry over there and go, we want to be part of what, I don't know if they called you Coach Schmidt or Jason, but did they
Usually
say,
just coach. Yeah.
Coach, yeah, what Coach is doing, we want to follow him wherever he goes. Did that happen or did you feel like
So
you had to choose?
it's been happening incrementally. That was kind of my hope. That was what I was hoping would happen as soon as I transitioned over, is that all these kids would just flock over and that they would be excited to be a part of this youth group. But there I think are some practical truths and some spiritual truths that have made that a slower process.
Mm.
Um, and that slower process is something that I'm also having to learn experientially right now, that
Mm.
things just move slower in reality than I like to ever think that they do.
Yeah.
But um, what has been happening. So I was hoping that like all these kids would come over to this youth group, but Hope is pretty far distance wise from Highland, like
Mm.
just practically, like it's
Yeah.
really far, and not a lot of these kids drive, or at least not yet. And the ones that do, like just normal practical stuff.
Yeah.
Um, but then I think also there is like I think it's going to be more rare than not that you find a group of 20 kids who are all just like, yeah, let's go do this thing that's a little uncomfortable to us, and let's do it with no questions asked. Like that's going to be
Right.
more rare than I think I would have originally thought deep down,
Mm-hmm.
even if I might have articulated otherwise. I think what I thought was like, no, everyone's down just to like go out and try something new, and
Yeah.
everyone's down to like go into a new environment. And that's just not the reality, especially for kids that are nervous and self-conscious. And, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. But what has happened, which is really, really cool, is we've been doing Friday morning Bible studies at Highland. That has taken away a lot of the barriers for a lot of those kids. And they have gotten plugged into that with a lot of enthusiasm and excitement. And Friday mornings have become one of my favorite times throughout the week already. It's like 7:45, before school starts. We have this little space on campus called the Hub. It's kind of a little bit of a separate third space. And we meet there, and I bring bagels and coffee, and we do a little Bible study until they go off to their first period class.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of the kids that I was like praying for specifically by name on a daily basis that they would come and get involved with the Hope Youth Group, they have since gotten involved with the Friday morning Bible study. And there's all kinds of different ranges of kids that already know Jesus, kids that didn't really grow up knowing Jesus, and kids that are kind of an in-between. But my hope still is that one day it turns into them from that getting connected to the church somewhere.
How did you make that happen? I'm so curious. Olivia, I hope it's okay I'm asking these questions. I find this and so many parallels to your dad's ministry as well. Your dad was always getting involved in the school, but that was a long time ago, when things were culturally a little different.
Yeah.
Yeah, how did you get in the school there on Friday mornings?
Well, I mean, having taught there was like a really good connection, and it made things a lot easier in that sense. And then the lady who works at the Hub, is, I think her title is the family liaison between like the Boys and Girls Club and the school. She's a lovely lady. I hope she doesn't mind me saying that. I don't know if she wants her
Sure.
her name thrown out there or anything, but she's a lovely woman, and her and I had been in relationship not only through me working there, but her son is one of the boys on the boys soccer team at Highland. And so there was a lot of connection there. She really wanted her son to get involved with something like this. And so honestly, it was really easy just in terms of going aloud and being like, hey, how could we make this happen?
Yeah.
And then stuff was pretty quick after that. So it was a connection that I could not have made by myself,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So I could ask so many questions, but before we get into all that, your own faith journey, Jason, obviously I shared about the legacy your parents have left for me and a lot of other students in their ministry, but you grew up, I mean, it was different for you. So would you mind sharing about your own faith journey?
My own faith journey. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I grew up in the household of the people that you were speaking of earlier, and everything you said earlier was true in that household as well. And outside of normal human errancy, there was no time that it wasn't true, in the sense of every day, whether explicitly or implicitly, it was known in our house that the most important thing was a relationship with Jesus, not a relationship with the church, not a relationship with a youth group, not a relationship with a pastor, but that the most important thing fundamentally and foundationally was a relationship with Jesus. And that was the house we grew up in. And I don't think that became real to me until I went off to college by myself, essentially laid aside my faith for the first year and a half or so, forgot about it altogether, not necessarily even willfully. But I think there was other parts of me that really took over. And those parts of me had a lot of pull on me at that time. But then one day it was just my relationship with Jesus that kind of brought me back. It was nothing more. It was just the fact that there was a very real relationship with him that kind of brought me back. I ended up transferring schools kind of largely because of that. because I felt like he was telling me to go. I didn't necessarily know where, but I felt like he was telling me to go, to kind of get out of this situation I had kind of put myself in. And so I did. And from there, I kind of started rebuilding my faith, essentially, because I felt like I had really dismantled it in a lot of different respects. And I felt like I had to kind of start rebuilding it. And I got involved with a Christian community again. This was up in Seattle. And from there, it was just kind of a degree and gradual step process of getting back to a place of feeling like this call to ministry might be a reality for me. Because I'd kind of felt it when I was graduating high school. I talked with my dad about it a little bit. And his advice to me was go get your degree. Ministry will always be there, and you can do ministry while you're doing all these other things, but go get your degree, go play soccer. You want to do both these things right now. And I'm so, so, so grateful he gave me that advice for a million and one reasons, but so I did that. And then kind of right as I was about to graduate, started feeling that kind of call to ministry again. Jesus has been being made more and more real to me all this time. And the gospel had been renewed in my heart continually, time and time again, getting to the end of my senior year of college, kind of starting to talk with my dad again about this possibility. And then that's when him and my mom got in the car accident. And so I think I just kind of reverted back to what the original plan was, which was grad school. And just because I didn't want to make a decision like that out of an emotional reaction. I was kind of worried about my own motives, right? About stepping into ministry because I felt like there was some kind of legacy I needed to fill or anything like that. But still, was going to grad school in Boise. I had just kind of tabled it for a little bit, that whole question. My faith continued to build just in different ways through different experiences that, things that I, again, could have probably articulated to you first, but needed to be made real to me from a heart standpoint, as far as my faith goes. And then I feel like I need to come to Albuquerque. It wasn't just like a gut feeling. There was a whole lot of practical and normal things that went into that. But so I came back to Albuquerque. My faith continued to grow through my involvement in a church here in Albuquerque called Citizen Church. And Citizen showed me so many wonderful things about what it meant to be involved in a church and what it meant to be serving a church, and to actually be part of one. Because even though I had grown up in a pastor's household, I don't know if I had ever truly felt part of one before, And Citizen showed me a lot of what I was and wasn't good at in terms of the ministry world. It also showed me a lot of what a life continuing to follow Jesus would look like in all the ways that my preconceived notions were continually being overturned, like, again, something that I wouldn't have articulated out loud, but thought and believed subconsciously was that once I made this decision to follow Jesus at a certain level, that the rest would just get kind of easier. And then I was confronted again with just my continued sinfulness. And I was like, oh, that didn't go anywhere after me saying that I was going to do this. Interesting how you didn't just fix that right away, and that was shown to me through a lot of these different processes while I was involved at Citizen Church. And then all of that led me to here. I was looking for a home church. There came a time where I just felt like God was kind of lifting my head up, kind of prodding me to go and find a new place to call a home church. And so I did, and I landed at Hope. And then very quickly, things matriculated into what they are now, which is my role on staff. So that's where I'm at now. Yeah. And when you ask about my own faith journey, I think I could take that in 1,000 different directions, depending on what you wanted to focus on. But
yeah. Have you ever doubted the reality of it? Yeah.
Doubted the reality of my faith or the reality of Jesus?
Well, yeah, I think something that I hear sometimes from people that I talk to on this podcast that are just searching, it's like, well, I've never experienced that kind of intimacy with God. I don't know what that looks like. And to be honest, when I see a lot of people and even my own friends leave the faith, a lot of times it has to do with the church. It has to do with the community. It has to do with their view of God's word but very rarely does it have to do with the relationship with Jesus, right? Um, so I'm just curious how your personal relationship with Jesus, how real that is, and how you've anchored everything on that. How you know it's for real.
Yeah. Well, I would say a couple things in response to that. The first thing is that, yes, I definitely have doubted the reality of it before. Um, and I don't think doubt and faith are mutually exclusive. And I think they're actually more interconnected. That entering into a life of faith means entering into a life of doubts, but faithfulness shows itself when you continue on as if what you already believed was true, even when you're experiencing those doubts currently. And that faith is trusting that you will come out the other side of that with the same knowledge and comfort and belief that you had before. And every time you do, it just builds that faith. So I absolutely have. I would say second, I am at a wonderful church. I was at a wonderful church before this at Citizen. Hope and Citizen were both wonderful. But if my relationship with Christianity was based off the church, I would have already left. And there are a million wonderful churches out there. This is not a rage against the machine style speech directed at the church. Not in the slightest. I love the church, but if my relationship with Christianity was based on the church, I would have already left. Mm-hmm. Or if my relationship with the church, or if my relationship with Christianity was based on relationships with different pastors, I would have already left. Even being connected with some of the most amazing pastors and some of the most amazing spiritual figures that I might ever meet. But when I say that it was the relationship with Jesus that brought me back, I would again point to both like a practical and spiritual side to it. The practical side I would classify as like the kind of rational and logical and more apologetic sides of the Christian faith, where there is just a lot of strong evidence for a real Jesus who actually did the things that it says that he did, actually said the things that it says that he says, and then actually died and rose again. And so the more rational and practical side of me in moments when I'm not experiencing as much on a spiritual level really clings to those and clings to, I know that this is the best answer for a lot of the questions that I've been asking. I believe that Jesus was who he said he was, did what he said he did. And so everything that he did after that is as important to us as it should be. Right. But then the spiritual side of that is that there is a very real presence in Jesus and in God the Father and in the Holy Spirit that can be felt and experienced. There is a very real truth in experiencing that we are more loved than we could ever be, and in experiencing forgiveness, even experiencing conviction, but then the forgiveness that comes after that. And so both are true, even if I am not feeling both all of the time. You know, the experience of it, the experience of God's love just drives me back towards increasing my knowledge of him. And then my knowledge of him increases the steadfastness in those kind of dry spells, or the increasing my knowledge of him increases the size of the vessel with which to experience his joy and his love. And when the vessel's bigger, then you want to experience more joy and love. And then you do experience more joy and love. And then you want to increase the size of the vessel. And so it just sends you back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, where it's just this interdependent relationship that without one or the other, I, again, might have walked away already. Because again, like I said, entering into a life of faith isn't entering into a life without doubt, but is entering into a life where you are committing, or trying even just to get through those dry spells, to experience what's on the other side. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, yeah. I have a lot more things I could share or ask, but Olivia, I want to give you the opportunity to jump in here. I haven't really done that. I'm sorry.
Oh no, you're good. I definitely agree on how can I say it? Like if it was just based on like church experiences or just interacting with humans in general, I definitely believe too I would have left, Jesus and all in all. Because, I mean, humans aren't perfect, but there's definitely been times where, people in church, people outside always think people in church are, perfect, but really they aren't, and they can just stab you just as bad.
Mm-hmm.
And I've definitely had heartbreak and stab in the back, and very not godly things happen to me in churches. And I definitely think too that's kind of where people kind of think, well, they're supposed to be godly people, and I don't want to interact with people like that. So of course they leave because they don't feel comfortable in something like that. But I definitely think that's kind of the line between religion and a relationship with Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And having a relationship with Jesus is nothing compared to what those people from church would do to you. So I definitely agree on, that. If you're just counting it on people, I definitely would have left as well. um, yeah. So yeah, people can be crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. And I
Mm-hmm.
do want to stress again, because there will be who knows listening to this podcast. I say this having spent the last 5 or so years, 4 or 5 or however many years, surrounded by some of the most amazing people and churches that I might ever have the chance to be surrounded by. Loved all of them and loved all of those places. Um, and so I do not want people to hear what I'm not saying, which is that, oh, there was these horrible people that did me dirty. And so if I wasn't plugged in with Jesus, I would have left the church. No, not at all. That is not what I'm saying.
Yeah, we've got imperfect people everywhere, and that includes us, right? And
Yeah.
we we get to have the privilege of being his hands and feet. And I was just telling someone yesterday, the same conversation with this gal. I just said, I gave a talk recently where I was sharing about the sheep needing to be in the pen. And when we wander off by ourselves, it's not good. Sheep by themselves are kind of a mess.
Yeah.
And they have to be,
Often
grabbed
bit.
onto. Yeah. Yeah, they get picked off pretty fast. We
Yeah.
need each other. And yeah, it's stinky in the sheep pen sometimes, but you're stinky too. We just need each other. None of us are Jesus. We need him. And Jason, I learned so much from your parents regarding character. Your dad. I remember talks he gave about, wrestling with God, about doubt, about mistakes he had made, and finding repentance with Jesus. Um, about gratitude, all these life lessons that I learned. One of the biggest ones for me that I come back to often is that we have the ability to pray for hearts that break at the same things that break God's. Like I remember this very he gave it to us as a warning. This is what I remember, and obviously I didn't take notes all these years ago. This is just what has replayed in my mind all these years. But he shared a story, and I may have brought it up the last time you were on the podcast, but of praying that God would show him how it felt when people rejected him. And he said he had never experienced pain like that, like pain in his life. And I remember him tearing up as he was sharing the story with us. And it was this powerful story of a real tangible weight that was put on him. And I left that, and all these years have come away with that going, if I pray for a burden for the lost, God will give it to me. Um, and I'm wondering what you learned the most from your parents. I know you mentioned the accident. Your dad passed away a few years ago. Um, but I mean, I look at that, what I've learned from their example, and I see, like you said, imperfect people. We're all imperfect, but it's been watching the faithfulness of people who love him well and love others well that helps and encourages me and other believers to keep going so often. Yeah.
The question is, what did I learn from them most? I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah, sorry. I have a history of just going all over the place. Yeah.
Um, I mean, to quantify it into a most, would be difficult, or to qualify it into a most would be difficult. I think one of the most underlying things that I see kind of involved in the most processes, right? Or the thing that I see as being most widely applicable that I think back to often was probably something that he said outright at some point, but was more so something that I just saw and heard from both my dad and my mom. And it was just humility. And it's almost such like a basic answer, right? But it was through and through what the both of them practiced in the house and with each other and with us, constantly. Where I think where a lot of parents can kind of come down pretty hard on their kids and then just kind of leave it at that because their kids were probably wrong. My parents would later come back and be like, hey, I'm sorry I responded that way. I'm sorry that I snapped at you. And then if there was further reprimand needed, they would, of course, say, but you also need to listen to us the first time that we ask you to do something. Right? But then you would see it with each other too, and the readiness to admit fault. And also the readiness to stand on truth when there was no fault, but do so lovingly and not hold it as self-righteousness over somebody else's head. Or the humility to constantly be seeking more and more righteousness. The humility of constantly being aware of both sides of the message of the gospel, right? Not only that we're more loved and valued than we could ever imagine, but also that we are more sinful than we could ever believe. Mm-hmm. And I think both of those were present. And underneath all of that is, I just think this humility that I think I have seen, both the presence and lack of in my own life. And both of those things have brought me back to what I witnessed growing up in that house, mm-hmm. and how it always pointed back to Jesus. Mm-hmm. Right. The great thing about that humility is that it was not a Christian showboat, mm-hmm. but it was a genuine humility that was pointing back to Christ. And I think at different points in my life, that is what most often makes me think of them, is just the humility.
Yeah. Yeah. And both of them so good at seeing people.
Yeah.
I got to spend some time with your mom last summer, just briefly. And it was so interesting seeing the recollections that I had in my memory of how she was with the reality of seeing her in action, 25 years later. And
How so?
yeah, we went to this restaurant and there was a group of girls and your mom instantly was like connecting with them and talking with them. I think we took their picture and stuff and with the waitress and all these different things. And it is all about Jesus. I don't want to put all people on these pedestals, right? I know I talk about Jonathan and Janice on this podcast quite a bit, but the reason is because when you see people do it well and you see people see people, and like you're saying, that humble piece of it. I mean, when I heard at that thing last weekend, that pastor say most people would get out of youth ministry, I never felt that from your parents. Not one time, not ever. They gave everything. And the incredible part is, they brought you guys along too. I remember, this, I have 4 kids now, but I remember kids coming around to all these different things. It felt like an overflow of this love that they had for the Lord and that they knew that God had for them, and it just felt like it overflowed to so many people. It just is really powerful to see that in action and to not just recall it in your memories, but then to see it again, refreshed. Sometimes our memories lie to us and then it's like, wait a second. No, that is how I remember it. It was just really precious. So anyway,
she still does it.
Yeah, I know.
Because she'll be around the young adults or she'll be around the youth now. And the same tendency is still there.
Yeah.
And it's a gifting as well as something that she does intentionally. It's both,
Yeah. Yeah. And it's really impacted a lot of people. Okay. One thing that I wanted to touch on, again, going back to like you doing this Bible study on Fridays, right? You didn't, and I don't, again, I don't want to just put you up on a pedestal here, but you didn't have to do that. You've got plenty going on already, I'm sure, with your responsibilities in your church. So why did that become part of your ministry? Um, what is it about going out? Uh, why? Why go out when it's more comfortable perhaps to stay with all the things that you have going on in the church?
Um, yeah, just to try and take away as many of those barriers as we could, you know. I think I went out because I spent a couple years developing a lot of heart connections with a lot of these students, and I wanted to get the message of the gospel to them. I wanted to, and for those that already knew Jesus, I wanted to help them along in increasing the intimacy of their relationship with Jesus through the message of the gospel and through looking in the word to see the person of Jesus as he's really portrayed. Because I know that was the only thing that brought me back when I was in college. And so I see these as like 4 years of almost like a prepping ground where you can try and develop the same things or try and foster the same things in other students before they go out. Um, so there's a middle school director that I work with at Hope. His name is James, and he's a wonderful man. He's getting married, actually. Um, but
Congratulations, James.
yeah, congratulations, James. But when him and I were kind of first coming into our respective roles that we're in right now, we met as kind of a team to talk about some of the values that we wanted to have at kind of the core of Hope's youth ministry. And one of the core values is to meet kids where they're at, almost radically, right? Radical almost feels like a too weighty of a word, you know, because all we're talking about is going to them, but meeting them where they're at physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, to where the youth group attendance dies to that, you know, or the goal of a youth group growth dies to that. That if a kid is not ready to be at a youth group, we will go to them. Or if a kid is not ready to be in that environment, or they aren't quite sure where they're at with Christianity, that will go to them in both of those things. And I think this Bible study at Highland was just one way that we could do that, where there's a lot of kids who couldn't make it out to our youth group. And when I asked them, I said, hey, like if I ever came here and did a Bible study here, is that something you guys would be interested in joining? And when the response was, oh yeah, I'm down. Oh, bet, coach. Yeah, for sure. Then I was like, easy, you know, easy choice. Because I think it would have just been such a waste of so many things if I built these relationships with these kids over years teaching at Highland, just to not go and then have the chance to very directly and out loud portray the good news. And especially in this role that I'm in now, what kind of like to be ministering to youth and then forsaking those youth that I had built those relationships with, what good is that? To leave them out of the chance to hear something like that, or to only give them the chance to hear something like that if they're willing to do it on our terms, and on our grounds, literally or figuratively. So I guess the why was just that the door was opened and the desire was there, and the sheep were there, you know, waiting to be fed in whatever regard they're ready to be fed.
Yeah.
And it has already been so, like I said earlier, it's already been so rewarding. You know, because you can tell when you're talking to somebody and you can see stuff resonating or you can see stuff not resonating. And so to be in this room at 7:45 in the morning with these kids and to see some of these truths about who Jesus is resonating, or that's my hope, you know, is just, it's wonderful.
Yeah.
And they need it. Everyone needs it, but they need it a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. So one of them says to you, Coach, tell me about this Jesus. Tell me the gospel. How do you share the gospel with them? There might be somebody listening right now who isn't familiar with what the gospel message is. Jason, I'd love for you to share it.
I mean, that would be a dream if somebody ever came up and asked me a question that direct. Are you kidding me? I pray for the day that a kid asks me a question like that. But I mean, I think honestly, like it would depend on who the kid is, you know? Because there are some kids who do not need to hear. Well, they need to hear it, but there are some kids who are not going to be reached by the same. Well, we're all sinful and fall short of the glory of God, but the good news is that Jesus gave himself up for us to die on the cross and be resurrected, and for our sins to be buried with him, and for us to be alive in a perfect relationship with him and God the Father. Like some kids are not going to respond to that. Mm. But those kids that wouldn't respond to that would very much respond to, hey, this anxiety and depression that you're feeling, what if I told you that there is a very real person that you can have a relationship with who brings the solution to that? And you're not watering down the gospel, but there is just a certain reality to it being shared differently with different kids depending on where they're at. Because quite honestly, the kid who goes home and is in a broken home and is more worried about having to go to work to help provide for that family, and who is dealing with addictions in the home, that kid needs a different message than the kid who has everything given to him. And the kid for whom pride has already encompassed his entire life because he's had everything given to him, or maybe not, or her. But so I think it would really just depend on the kid, There's kids who the thing they need to hear is that there is a hope of something beyond what they're experiencing now. Mm-hmm. And that there is a hope out of what they're experiencing inside their own mind or heart. That there's a hope for peace and for joy, and for their mind to be settled at last, and for their spirit to be lifted at last, regardless of when that happens. But then there's those kids that need to be told, like, hey, what this is sin. Mm-hmm. And we're all guilty of it. Every single one of us.
Yeah.
So I think it would just depend on the kid.
Yeah. That's good. Olivea,
but I still hope somebody asked me that question once.
And then show up at youth group where you get to go deeper.
Oh, wonderful. That'd be great.
Olivea, do you have any follow-up questions or thoughts on what Jason has shared?
Yeah, I do have one question. I don't know if this is going to sound kind of like weird or not. Well, first of all, I do want to apologize I'm so sorry about the passing of your father. I lost my mom a few years ago, and I have a couple friends that are, my age, early 20s, and they've lost their parents or a grandmother was one of his, like his motherly figure. And it's just really interesting to me when that first happened, I just, all these minds, going around and all that, all these thoughts, losing a parent so young. But it's been very healing being with friends who have something like that happen as well. We've connected. But anyway, going on with that, how can I word this or ask this as a question? So do you feel like, because obviously you're very 100%, confident that your father is with Jesus right now. Do you feel like that kind of has impacted positively with your relationship with Jesus? Just kind of knowing that your dad is up there?
Yeah. And the kind of reverse side to that question is, do you think I would be more embittered if I wasn't sure if he was up there or not?
I never thought of it that way, but I could definitely see where some people could definitely kind of.
Gotcha. No, I was just clarifying.
Yeah. In my experience with my dad's passing,
it was truly, I think, just the grace of God that I was never angry with God. I was grieved, I was heartbroken, and still am a lot of times. And that void can still be felt often. But I think it was just the grace of God that I was never angry with him, because I think everything in me rationally would have told me to be angry. If you stop for 2 seconds to think about the situation, to think that my dad and my mom, who was in the car, two people that have spent their lives in service of so many others in the name of the gospel of Jesus Christ, to be hit by a car with somebody on the other side who was under the influence. And it was on a highway out in the middle of nowhere in Wyoming. Like what are the chances? What are the odds? Every rational part of me would tell me to be angry. And honestly, it wasn't even the rational part of me thinking, oh, but my dad's with Jesus. That makes me less, that helps my relationship with Jesus. I would not say that knowledge itself, honestly, helped my relationship with Jesus, quote unquote. It served as a comfort, sometimes. And then other times it did not serve as a comfort, because in those moments when it did not, I was missing my dad here. I was happy for him. If I tried to pull it out of there, happy for him. Happy he's no longer in pain, free from the burden of sin. But in those moments, I was very selfish and fleshly and thinking, no, but I want my dad here. Mm-hmm. But so that knowledge in and of itself, that my dad was with his creator and my dad was free from sin and free from pain, if I'm honest, was not something that helped my relationship with Jesus. It is 1,000% true. And it is 1,000% a comfort. And it is 1,000% the hope that we have in putting our faith in Jesus. But it was not something that necessarily helped my relationship with Jesus. I can't look back a single time and recall when my thought process went there. Honestly, what helped my relationship with Jesus the most through this grieving process, I would say, are the different, like a lot of different things, but one, the different ways that he comforted me, very, again, spiritually and very practically, both of those being from him. I would say the different ways that I felt the freedom to grieve and still be a child of the Most High God. The fact that my grief was seen by Jesus as well. The fact that Jesus experienced my grief as well very much helped my relationship with Jesus. I felt closer to him having experienced this loss. I read through the Gospels again after all of this, obviously, and felt like I connected with, in a different way for the first time ever, the suffering, compassionate Savior. And he put himself through that willingly. And reading that and realizing what exactly that meant only deepened my relationship and gratitude and love for Jesus. So that helped me with it. I would say the amount that I have seen this experience of mine help in guiding other people through the same thing, that has deepened my relationship with Jesus. Because I see the ways that even in this life, that he doesn't let I'm going to be careful with what I say, that even in this life, that these horrible, horrible things have found some sort of redemption, not restoration, but some sort of redemption through the workings of his kingdom. And that is not me saying that there was a reason for my dad's passing. I think that would get into a whole longer conversation. But like there's not a lot backing this, but I think what has helped me kind of reconcile some of that is I don't think there's a reason for everything, but I think there is reason brought from everything because of his sovereignty. Because I just won't, somebody in favor of some of these doctrines can come and find me after this podcast is released. I just won't listen to there being a reason for my dad being hit by a driver under the influence. Mm-hmm. I will not hear that there's a reason for that, but I can absolutely believe and get behind that there's reason brought from that because of God's sovereignty. And I think that has deepened my relationship with Jesus, if that answers kind of your original question.
No, that definitely does. Kind of you like, explaining that kind of like has kind of, I don't know what the right word is. We kind of like reword or kind of wrestled how I feel with kind of the passing of my mother. And because she basically had really bad depression, very bad anxiety, and it got to the point where she wasn't taking care of herself, and that was the ultimate reason as to why she passed away. And I kind of, a little bit after her passing away was kind of when I kind of got back on track with my relationship with Jesus. And I guess the reason why I ask that is because it's just kind of interesting, in my opinion, just meeting and kind of talking to people who younger, losing a parent. Because, it's, I mean, no matter what age you lose your parent, it's hard. But, I feel like as a younger person, it's a little bit harder,
Mm.
because you don't have all those milestones that you wish you could have had with them. But anyway, so like, I guess the one thing that hit with me was I was just in my favorite spot in my hometown, and it's like you see the lake and the mountains. It's just my favorite. Anyway, so I was just talking to God, and all of a sudden, I just had this feeling, she's definitely up there. She loved the Lord for sure.
Mm.
And I just all of a sudden had like this hopeful feeling, like I'm going to be with God and she's going to be with God, and just having this hope that I'm going to see them again. And
Yeah.
I think that's what kind of also sparked my relationship with Jesus as well. I mean, everyone has different, paths, and every
Yeah.
relationship with Jesus is going to look different with everyone. But I just thought, how that connected with you, with Jesus. Because for me personally, I definitely agree with what you said too. Like, it's not the stone of my relationship with Jesus, but it definitely has helped a little
Yeah.
bit and given like a better understanding. And then along the way, I know a few people who have lost their parents along the way. And, and my cousin, I lost my aunt. And so they're in the same position as well. And so just kind of talking through that of how we're feeling, and kind of still putting in the mindset of glorifying God through the grief, and, remembering the good things. So yeah, I was just wondering about that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, no, my experience does not in the slightest invalidate somebody else's experience of feeling drawn closer to Jesus because of the comfort that their loved one is now with him. And
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if that just makes you in those moments a much less selfish person than me, honestly, is kind of what my gut tells me. Because I would, in the place that I was at when I was kind of going through the thick of this grieving process, if I would think about that, it did feel for myself at those times like he ain't here.
Mm-hmm.
um, and so it was very self-centered in that way of me to think of it that way. Because why shouldn't the reality that my dad is with his creator and free from all, why shouldn't that draw me closer to Jesus? And it probably should, honestly. Um, and maybe that's part of what I needed from this podcast today was
Mm-hmm.
a little reflection on that. Like, why shouldn't the reality of my loved ones being with their creator for eternity in all joy, why shouldn't that make me grow even closer to Jesus? And maybe, I think maybe I just hadn't brought enough uh, attention to that. I don't think I had brought enough introspection to that.
Mm.
Well, definitely don't get yourself down on that, because,
No.
everyone has,
No.
different mindset and, different perspectives. And yeah, I've definitely been angry with God too. Because, she was my mother, I mean, I have siblings, but half siblings, but, no one to really like go through it with. And there was definitely moments where I was very angry, and angry at her, because her
Yeah.
health, she could have, because her mother died the same way as she did,
Mm.
and, feeling, well, why didn't she
Sorry.
take care of herself for me, and all of that. But
Yeah.
yeah,
No, I'm
it's
sorry to
easy
hear
to
that.
go down that rabbit hole.
No, it's funny you saying don't get down on yourself, because I'll be talking with my pastor / my boss now, and he's a great man. But we'll be talking about something sin related, and I'll kind of be talking in a manner like this. And he's like, well, you're probably right. And it's probably worse than you imagine, and that's just kind of the reality.
Oh my
And it
gosh.
honestly, that helps so much to hear. When it comes to
Uh-huh.
our own sin, we're all right. And it's worse than we could ever imagine.
Yeah.
That's
But
true.
the flip side of that is also true, So it was funny listening to you saying that, and then my head immediately reverting to what he usually says, which is like,
Uh-huh.
no, but you're probably right. And it's also probably worse than you could imagine.
I always try to look at like, well, it could have been worse. This could have happened instead of this or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sounds a lot like what Timothy Keller says in his sermons. I love listening to his stuff.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, you're way worse than you can imagine, but you're
Yeah.
way more loved than you could ever imagine. It's so good. It's so
Yeah.
good.
I listen to a ton of Tim Keller, and so
Yeah.
does our pastor. Yeah.
Perfect. I love it. Yeah. I was going to ask you two final questions here, Jason. And I guess one, I'm just going to change it a little bit. I was talking to someone recently, a good friend of mine, who had lost her husband. And she said, I've made the decision to keep on living, that I'm meant to be here. I know after you experience the kind of things that you and Olivea have, it's like, what is the purpose of life? There's that reflection of what am I here for? And what do you tell yourself, and what would you want someone to hear as maybe they're wrestling with, like, what am I here for? What is this for? I'd love for you to share a little bit on that.
Yeah. My wrestling's on what is the purpose of life? What am I here for?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's been pretty easy, especially getting the chance to, easy is the wrong word. Let me already take that back. But it's been, especially since stepping into this job full-time at the church, it has been easier to see all the ways that the Great Commission can manifest itself in different areas of life. And then from there, see all the ways that you could spend a lifetime just pursuing that and never grow bored or never grow complacent. And you would only be reaching more and more fulfillment the longer you pursue that. And the Great Commission being, for anyone listening who's not aware of what it is, just go forth and make disciples of all nations, baptizing in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. But within that, there is no one right way to do that. And so a life spent in pursuit of that can look so exciting and so variable. And it can lead you from teaching PE to working at a church to then going and, I don't know, working at a Target, or like there is no one thing that can ever fall outside of that realm if that is your goal. And having experienced what I have experienced with Jesus, why would I not want other people to experience the same thing? And so, my answer might be a pretty churchy answer, but I think the purpose of life is to get the message of the gospel to as many people as possible and show them how it can fit in all of their different capacities and faculties and their current context and their current situation. And then show them how from all of those places, those different contexts and those different situations, and using their different faculties and with their different capacities, all the unique ways that they can then go and reach other people. Like it is so multi-layered. It's not monotonous at all. And in that, I think will be encapsulated a lot of the other kind of normal answers that people will give to the meaning of life. People who especially are not, would not call themselves a Christian, they might give a whole bunch of different answers as to the meaning of life, like to experience love or to experience joy to the highest degree possible, or to cause as much joy and cause as little suffering as possible in other people, to mitigate the effects of suffering on as many people as possible, to serve as many people as possible. Or even if they're not as, benevolent or outward focused, they might say to better myself as much as possible, to better my mind as much as possible, to better my standing as much as possible, and then later pass that on to my family. All of those things, every single one of those things that I just said, I think is easily encapsulated in the message to go forth and make disciples of all nations, baptizing in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. I think they're all in different ways inevitable to a certain degree in that one pursuit. And so, yes, it is kind of like a churchy answer. I don't want to give the cop out ministry answer, but I think that's kind of genuinely where I've landed at this point.
Yeah, it's good. I was just talking to my assistant Anna, who I think you've corresponded with a little bit, and we were having a conversation about the Great Commission. In John 17:3, Jesus says, and this is eternal life, that they would know you, the only true God, and Jesus Christ whom you have sent. And that word know in the Greek, it's gnoskos. It's like this intimate knowing. And it's like, I don't know, I probably picked it up from Keller or C.S. Lewis or something. It wasn't my idea, right? But like to know God and to live to make him known, to just sit with him, to abide with him, and then to go out and share with people. Like this is who he is. This is the way. Hope for your depression, hope for your anxiety, hope for your worries, hope for a life to come, the love that you're talking about. It's so true. Yes. And it is, who cares if it's a churchy answer, because it is the answer.
Because it's the truth.
It's
right?
the truth.
I need to
Let's
stop
just tell
qualifying it like that. Yeah. I need
All
to stop qualifying it like that.
Final question that we ask everybody. The Finding Something Real podcast is about finding something real with Jesus. REAL is an acronym for restoration, eternity, authenticity, and love. All things that we found in relationship with him. Which of those things, restoration, eternity, authenticity, or love, stands out to you the most in your life right now, and why?
I would say restoration and authenticity stand out the most right now. I don't know if I would be able to pick between the two of those very well. Because I think the past maybe 2 years, 3 years, I would say one of the largest themes that I've seen stick around longer than I would like it to. But one of the largest themes that I've seen over those years in my walk with Jesus is the further and further realization of my need for him. And then the continued meeting of those needs from him and restoring me in that process. I say stuck around longer than I would have liked it to, because I think in my life, I like to think that as soon as I learn a lesson, it's like, all right, cool, on to the next one. We got that lesson, we can move on, Lord. Like you have shown me the value in giving, God, so now we can move on. That's how I like it to have worked. But with this, specifically, it being made real to me continuously, how much I will fall short in every category if I'm trying to do it on my own without him. So I will fall short morally. I will fall short righteously. I will fall short productively. The things that I try and make happen from a productive standpoint will fall short if I try to do it on my own. And then, I learned that, he kind of puts that on my heart. He convicts me. I feel like you quote unquote learn that lesson. And then I'm like, all right, cool. And then it continues. And then I continue to see more and more levels to which without him, I have continually tried to do things on my own, and how it is just futile. But then in the midst of all of that, in the midst of those realizations, seeing how much he also restores me in the knowledge that I am loved and valued by him. And that there are people that he's put in my life that, because of their relationship with him, love and value me. And seeing even in these long spells of what feels like way too long to be comfortable, in these long spells, there'll just be these little moments where I feel like he brings that realization, and it is restoring, and it gives me just enough to hang on. And it is not something that I think will be that way for forever. But I think, if I am being honest and vulnerable, it's been a difficult number of years in that regard. It is hard to have a mirror constantly held up to you, showing you all the real ugly truths about yourself. But in the midst of all that, there's been a very real restoration from him,
Yeah.
And a sustenance. And then I coupled the authentic piece in with that, because from all of that, it has made it feel very authentic. It has made it feel very much not like something that I am just parroting from somebody that I heard, you know? And there's been a certain amount of joy to come from that like, thank you, God, for making this so real to me through this. Like, thank you. Like, there's a little bit of peace to come from that. Like, I'm not just making this up, because why would I make this up? Why would I make this portion up? This is horrible. Like, I'm not horrible. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like, there's been a certain amount of joy to come from that. And it brought a little bit of concrete realness to some scriptures where Paul talks about rejoicing in suffering, where it's like, no, there's something good coming from this. So thank you, I think that's kind of why those two are sticking out most to me right now. Yeah. I would say.
Love it.
That's also not supposed to sound like so morose. Like, life is good. Like, even in the midst of all that, life has been good. It really has been. And that's not me just putting like a Band-Aid over that. Life really has been objectively good all at the same time.
I liked it before. I like it now. It's all good. Jason Schmidt, thank you for coming on here and sharing. It's so precious to have you on here and to hear how God is using your hands and feet in the lives of people. And I'm just grateful. And Olivea, thank you for sharing and for opening up about your questions and things that you've wrestled with and pain that's been in your life. And thank you. Thank you both. I'm going to say until next time, and then I'll have you guys stay on for just a second. So until next time.